All right. Well, welcome everybody. Good morning. Welcome to this conversation about extraordinary leadership. And just want to welcome everybody here. And my thanks to Brady Ware and Kara and Bruce who are on today's webinar to talk about an honest conversation around extraordinary leadership. But I want to start by sharing a story. Earlier in my career, I was with an organization and it was all I could do. My goal was to last a year, and I couldn't. Uh, I made it 11 months. And as I reflect back and think about that time at that job, um, the leadership, in particular the CEO, lacked many of the qualities that we're going to be covering here today. Um, in my biased opinion, they lost a really good employee, right? Um, but I moved on to other things, and that organization still continued on as well. But it was just unfortunate when I think about the topic we're talking about today and the many nonprofit leaders and organizations that I work with today. Leadership is such a critical piece of this. And I believe that people don't leave organizations, people leave people. And so when we talk about some of these qualities and some of these topics here today, I just encourage you to keep that in mind is how are you as a leader? And where can you improve in the next day, next week, next 30 days? So I'm curious, in the chat, however you want, is how many leaders are in the room? I'm just curious. How many leaders are in the room? Thanks, Tracy. We have one so far. All right, thanks, Scott. Great to see you. Excellent. Great. I start with this question very broadly with this discussion because I believe we all are. We've got a lot of CEOs, we've got a lot of executive directors, but there's also directors. There's a director of development, the director of programming. There's also a director of a certain or a certain initiative, maybe that you're reporting up to the marketing director, right? But you're also a leader in leading that initiative or that particular event, if you will. And really, personally, we all are leaders of ourselves, right? I'm a leader of myself. I make choices every day, what I want to eat, how I want to exercise, the work I want to do, and so leading myself. So I'm going to say that and argue that we are all leaders. So I want you to keep that in mind as we go through a lot of these qualities here today. And I do want to say this. Some of this is going to resonate. Some of this, it's going to be new. And some of the things we talk about, it's going to be a really good reminder for you. But we're going to cover a lot of information. So I just want you to keep in mind, what are those things that resonate for you, and what are those two or three areas where there's an opportunity for you to become an extraordinary leader. Kara, if I can ask you, we do have a poll just to ask you to rate your leadership level. I'm just kind of curious where people kind of see themselves, right? Scale from 1 to 10, 1 being I need help, and 10 being I'm already extraordinary. I'm curious if we have any 10s, if there's any humility in the group. So go ahead and rate where you think your current leadership level is on a scale from 1 to 10. Okay. Thanks for your honesty at the 2 and 3 and lower level. A lot of 7s. Okay. I'm not surprised. Great. And no one answered 10. Thank you. So great. Thank you, everyone. Wherever you put, whatever number you put there, my encouragement is as we go through this today and as you reflect and continue to think about what we cover later today, what's one thing you can do to make that go from a 5 to a 6 or a 7 to an 8 in the next 30 days? And being intentional, right? So just encourage you to be thinking about some of those things that are going to help you get one step closer to extraordinary. So let's start off with first a definition, right? A lot of people have different ideas and thoughts about what leadership means. You see a lot of definitions. It's inspiring. Um, uh, I like to boil this down into three words: intentionally influencing individuals. And over the last several years, I've developed a great collaboration with Dr. Michael Brown of DMB Coaching. And a lot of this, what I'm covering today, is in collaboration with Dr. Michael Brown. And I love this leadership definition. It's so simple. We're intentionally influencing individuals. It's not a position, it's not a title, but it is one person at a time. And when we think about intentionally influencing individuals, we're doing it on purpose. We are um, uh, really thinking about how we are going to influence this individual. And when I say influence, not in a negative way, right? We're here to lift them up. We as leaders are here to lift them up, provide that guidance, that support, that mentorship, influencing that individual in a positive way so they can become an extraordinary leader. And again, we do it one person at a time. So let's go through each of these 10 qualities. And I'm sure that there's many more that I'm not going to cover here today. But these are not etched in stone, but these are some of the qualities that really come up time and time again when it comes to leadership. That first one is character, right? What do we mean by character? It's the awareness that who I am when no one is looking is who I really am. So think about that. Think about you. Are you the same person at home as you are at work? Driving in the car when that person cuts in front of you? What's that character? It's the awareness that who I am when no one is looking is who I really am. Confidence is next. The self-belief that I am awesome no matter what others might think or say about me. You know, when I think about this, well, I'll just share, right? About 15, 16 years ago, I lacked a lot of confidence. I was stuck, right? I didn't have that self-belief that I was awesome, no matter what others might think or say about me. I let those uh, naysayers get to me. But then I hired a coach, started doing the work. One of the things that I learned in increasing my confidence is that it started with clarity. Where am I going? What do I want to do? How am I going to do it? Right? Having that clarity first then leads to competence. All right, if I'm going to go in this direction, where do I need to increase my competence, increase my skills, my abilities, right? And by doing that and stepping up to the plate and taking my swings and getting my reps, that confidence slowly came back over time. And I want to be careful because there's a slippery slope when I think about confidence. And I think some of you likely have experienced this at some point in your career, is that arrogant leader, right? The, the arrogant leader says, I can do that. The confident leader, the arrogant leader says, I think I can do that. The confident leader says, I can do that. They have that level of confidence in themselves. It's that self-belief that they are awesome. Next, charisma. It's the choice to help others feel fantastic about themselves. Now, sometimes when I talk about this particular quality, charisma, people are thinking, oh, it's that person that's waving their arms and they're loud and they're very charismatic, right? But in this lens that we're looking through today, it's the choice to help others feel fantastic about themselves. And what do I mean by this? It's easy to give others what's wrong, right? It's easy. We have a lot of problem spotters, a lot of what's wrong. But the charisma, this choice to help others feel fantastic about themselves, is we're giving them praise. We're giving them encouragement. How often do we take the time to give praise to that other person, to help them feel fantastic about themselves? And when we do that, great things happen. That person's confidence goes up. They feel more empowered. They make better decisions, right? So that charisma as a leader, again, that choice, it's that choice to help others feel fantastic. So I'm going to stop there, right? Out of these three, right out of the gate, I'm just curious, put it in the chat, which one resonates most with you? Which one do you feel, yeah, you know what? I'm lacking in that area a little bit, and I could be more intentional about improving in that area. Just go ahead and put it in the chat. Okay, great. Confidence, charisma. Okay, a lot of confidence. Okay, great. Awesome. Confidence, character. Okay, a little bit of character, a lot of confidence. Great, thank you. Thank you. All right, let's move on. All right, competence. I mentioned that earlier when I mentioned the clarity to competence that leads to the confidence. And if I expand upon that line of thinking when I was working with that coach, 15, 16 years ago, and I never thought it was hard for me to believe I would ever get to that point, but it goes from clarity to competence to confidence, which then leads to influence, impact, and then income. All of you development directors, those in charge of fundraising, right? We want the money, right? We want the funds. We got to get the money, right? But a lot of times before we get that income, it takes clarity to competence to confidence that puts us in a position to be more influential and impactful that then also leads to that funding or that income. But this competence here is the decision to get a task done and do it really well. But we have to be competent. We have to have the skill set to do that in a competent way. But I want to zero in on the one word here. It's the decision, right? If we're that executive director and we're lacking in one key area, perhaps as the executive director, it's our decision then to increase our competence in order to get that task or to get that role done really, really well. Something that comes to mind as I think about competence and the decision to get a task done and do it really, really well is the word trust. And leaders, executive directors who are managing a team, there's a level of trust in order for you to pass on or delegate or assign a task or an initiative to somebody on your team. There's trust, and you're making that decision that that other individual is going to get that task done and do it really, really well. But without trust, a lot of other things don't happen within your organization. And I just want to share with you real quick the 5 behaviors of a healthy team, a healthy organization. It comes from Patrick Lencioni. And at the very, very base level, at the foundation, is trust. And what I'm talking about here, as it relates to competence, is that performance-based trust, right? But in that performance is we trust that that person is going to perform to the best of their abilities, right? There's also vulnerability-based trust. If I could talk about that for a second, vulnerability-based trust is simply, you know what? I don't know how to do that. Can you help me? Collaborating, right? Collaborating with someone else to bring them in to help you, right? To increase your own competence, to help you with that certain task. And from the trust goes to healthy conflict, which goes to commitment, which goes to accountability, and at the end we have results. And I'll touch on some of those throughout the conversation here this morning. There it is, collaboration. What do we mean by collaboration as one of the qualities of leadership? It's the understanding that we is more important than me. Let me read that again. The understanding that we is more important than me. So when I think about that, a lot of the leaders that I work with and coach, have conversations with, there's this feeling that they've got to have all the answers. There's this myth, I believe, that we feel like we've got to fit it all in. We've got to fix it. We've got to figure it out. And I'm here to tell you, If that continues, it's going to lead to that burnout. It's going to lead to that frustration. And sometimes we need to be vulnerable and trustful to say, we need to collaborate on this. We is more important than me. We will figure this out. Trusting your team to collaborate and have their insight and perspectives on whatever that initiative is or whatever that circumstance is that you're trying to figure out. And let me say this, people support what they help create. By collaborating and inviting your team and others into the conversation is an invitation for them to support ultimately what is being created or a decision that is being made. And I know sometimes we as leaders, I hear this, I heard it yesterday from somebody, it's just easier for me to do it. Oh, that's a killer. I just cringe every time I hear that because, oh, it only takes me 5 minutes. Well, those 5 minutes get added to another task that took 5 minutes. Maybe this one took 10. And over time, that compounds, right? And I'm curious over the course of a week, how much time you are spending on tasks that you're depriving someone else a learning opportunity by not delegating to that individual or collaborating with someone else. So we is more important than me. And I love this next one. How many here love conflict? We're not live in a room, right? But whenever I ask this in front of an audience, I might get one or two arms that raise and they're just trying to be funny, right? Typically, we don't like conflict. What do we mean by this? It's the perspective that that differences are okay and disagreements are normal, right? It's the perspective that differences are okay and disagreements are normal. And if I could just lean in on this for a moment, there is a conflict continuum that I want to share with you, and it comes from Lencioni's book, The Advantage, where organizations who don't lean into the conflict typically fall back into what is called artificial harmony. In the moment, it feels awkward. I don't want to have this discussion for whatever reason because it's hard, right? We fall into this artificial harmony. We bury our heads in the sand, right? We avoid it. But we know ultimately what happens is that's not how we're going to advance our mission. That's not how we're going to work towards in collaboration, perhaps, to get to that end result that we're going for. My encouragement is to embrace and to step in and to be open within your organization about, let's call it out. And when I talk about conflict, it's not we're having a drop down, gloves off shouting match. That is not what it is. But when I talked earlier about trust and the importance of having trust within your organization, trust leads to the ability for your team and your organization to have healthy conversations, robust. I call them robust conversations instead of conflict. Conflict feels like such a negative word, right? But it's for us to have those conversations that absolutely have to happen in order for us to advance our mission or work closer to that end goal, right? And when I talk about conflict or those robust conversations, on the other end of the spectrum is mean-spirited. We don't want to step into that area. It's deconstructive. We need to be very careful in the heat of the moment when we're pushing back and we're trusting that I can share my opinion with no retribution, that I can share my opinion and know that my thoughts and perspective are going to be valued. That allows that conflict or that difficult conversation to continue and to get to where you need to be. And if I can share this quick little tool, right? Let's say you're in a leadership team meeting and there's 4 or 5 leaders in the room and you're having your weekly or your bi-monthly meeting, and there's pushback or you're brainstorming. And someone next to you might be sharing their perspective, sharing their opinion, and you're thinking that you're sitting there going, there's no way that is ever going to happen, right? It's a tool called yes and. right? We want to continue that positive conversation. We want to continue the momentum and that thinking. And so what's the 10% of what that person just shared that you do like? That's the hook. Latch onto that. Yes, I agree with that. And then you continue to share your perspective and opinion, right? Because there's a slippery slope in stepping into that mean-spirited space that we do not want to step into in that conflict. Say, no, that'll never work. That's the worst idea I've ever heard. Boom, you just put the kibosh on any positive energy in that conversation. We can have difficult conversations in a very cordial way and embracing that conflict. The first step is stepping into that space. Okay, let me stop right there and let me ask again. We covered three more: competence, collaboration, and conflict. I'm wondering, put into the chat which one now is resonating out of those three. What's resonating most with those three? Competence, collaboration, conflict. Yeah, conflict. Okay, great. Deanna has collaboration, a lot of conflict. I'm not surprised, right? Not surprised. A lot of conflict. Yeah, that's a difficult one, but I'm here to tell you, I promise you, when we step into that conflict and embrace it and lean in, great things happen. Deeper, more robust conversations happen as a result. It strengthens the trust, it strengthens the relationships with those people. All right, let's go on. Commitment. It's the focus on doing hard things and pushing through distractions, disappointments, or doubts. Doing hard things. I've said this word a lot already: decisions and choices. We are 100% of the choices that we make. Let me say that again. We are 100% the choices that we make. And doing hard things. Look, if I could talk about hard things, life is hard. I think we all can agree to that, right? Life is hard, and there's an opportunity for us to do hard better instead of the avoiding and the artificial harmony. The hard is still there, right? So how are we going to be committed and focus on addressing that hard thing and pushing through whatever that distraction is? Would you rather be, let me share this example. It is hard to be healthy, correct? It's hard for me to get up in the morning and work out. I'm really bad at it. I'm in a funk right now, to be honest with you. But I have a choice, right, to do the hard thing. It's hard to be unhealthy. When we don't eat healthy, we don't exercise, we know how we feel, right? But it's also hard to be healthy, to be committed to getting on the treadmill, going to the gym, eating healthy, right? It's hard there too. So that commitment is doing those hard things, and I would say doing hard better, despite those distractions or disappointments or any doubts that you might have. I love this one. Man, if we could be more curious. Curiosity helps with the conflict that I talked about a moment ago. Curiosity helps with the collaboration. Curiosity is the fascination with the uniqueness of each and every human being. Being fascinated with the uniqueness of everyone. There's a book called Change Your Questions, Change Your Life by Marilee Adams. I highly recommend, if you're a leader, sit in a leadership position, on a leadership team, read that book. It will change your life, right? And in a nutshell, it's how can we be more curious in the moment, whether that's a one-on-one conversation, a staff meeting, a board meeting. I would like to have everyone be a chief curiosity officer within their organization and asking that open-ended question. And let me share a quick story with you. I was working with a CEO not too long ago, and in our coaching session, she was talking about her frustration around the lack of engagement with the board. She just had a board meeting earlier in the week, and I'm sure many of you have been there. You're in that meeting, you're going through the agenda, people are presenting their reports, we're checking off the box, and then there's always the question, are there any questions? Is anything not clear? Does anybody have anything to add to this? You notice those three questions I just asked are all yes, no questions. So when I was talking with this CEO, I was like, I wonder what would happen if you changed those questions into simple, open-ended questions and not yes, no. What would happen? Next month, and we talked about it at the next month's board meeting, she was going to be more mindful of asking the curious, open-ended questions instead of, are there any questions? It's, hey, can anybody share with me what kind of impact you think that this initiative might have? Boom. Responses, conversation, deeper discussion, engagement was a complete 180. Just a simple mindfulness of being curious and asking that open-ended question. So I'm wondering, what curiosities come to mind as you're having one-on-one conversations, when you're in that team meeting, staff meeting, or board meeting that can really add to the conversation and allow it to go in a much deeper place? Connection, the relational magnetism that attracts people into my presence. The relational magnetism that attracts people into my presence, that connection. How many times have you gone to a networking event and you meet somebody for the first time and the conversation is all about them? Well, I do this and I've done that and I've raised this amount of money and it's me, I, right? And that hubris is just, they're laying it on. I would encourage you, don't be that person, but how are we being more interested rather than trying to be interesting? Let me say that again. How often are we trying to be interested rather than interesting? When we are trying to be interested, we're making a deeper connection with that individual. Tell me about yourself. Why do you do this work? What challenges are you having? Right? Whatever interesting question comes to mind. I was blessed earlier in my career. My background is in journalism and public relations earlier in my career. And the first half of my career was spent in Chicago, worked for a number of different agencies. And the one agency I worked for was Golan Harris. Right now it's Golan, but Al Golan was the founder. He started this back in the early 50s. His first client was McDonald's, and it was a handshake with Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's. I mean, just an iconic individual. Al Golan was in the PR world. And so one afternoon, we had a meeting out in Oak Brook. They were then, McDonald's was then headquartered out there. And I rode in the car with Al Golan, just the two of us, 45-minute drive out to this meeting. And you know what? He was more interested than interesting, trying to be interesting. We didn't talk about work. I think about that, just fascinating 45 minutes for me, because we never talked about work. He asked me, where are you from? What do your parents do for a living? Right? Just asking me interesting. He was interested. He was genuine and authentic. He was making a connection to me as a human being, as another person, right? And that experience just deepened our relationship. And I wanted to talk to Al Golan more, right? But what are we doing? How are we making connections within our own office, every day in our jobs, with our donors, with our volunteers? It's that relational magnetism that attracts people into my presence, being more interested than interesting. And then our last one here, courage. It's a tough one. I get it. It's a tough one. It's the mindset. Let me stress that. It's the mindset required to step into hard, difficult, and challenging situations, right? It's the courage to step into the conflict. It's the courage to speak up in a meeting and trust that there's not going to be any retribution. It's the courage to ask that curious question. It's the courage, right, to make a deeper connection to somebody. The courage to be vulnerable, perhaps, for an idea or a conversation to continue to move forward in a very creative and innovative way, right? But it's a mindset to step in and have a choice, right? To do hard better, to have that difficult conversation perhaps. So let me stop there. And out of those last four, I'm kind of curious what's resonating most. If you want to put that in the chat, is it commitment, curiosity, connection, courage? Yeah, Change Your Questions, Change Your Life was the book. But of those last four, all right, courage, yep, courage, curiosity, great. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, a lot of courage and curiosity. And you could see these 10 qualities that I just covered, there's a lot of overlap, right, with these. I just said it takes courage to step into that conflict or that difficult conversation. It takes courage, right, to be curious. It takes courage, perhaps, to collaborate with someone and to say, hey, I need help. So, yeah, great. Thank you, everyone. And you know what? I'm going to add a couple of more that aren't on this list because I get to. And I'm sure there's a lot of others that come to mind for each of you. But the word consistency, right? If we can be mindful, if we can pick, one or two of these qualities where you feel, boy, if I made a choice to be more mindful and intentional about one or two of these things, and I can do that consistently, good things are really, really going to happen. It's going to take you from ordinary to extraordinary sooner than you might think. And if I could add this, and you notice they all start with C's, but I'm gonna go off, call an audible and go off base here and say there's another one. I'm a big fan of Jim Collins, Good to Great, if any of you are familiar with that. And he did a research study years ago of over 100 CEOs leading major companies. And he talked about in his research level 5 leadership. Only 11 of more than 100 of these leaders that they researched, only 11 had level 5 leadership. And it was humility. They were humble. They weren't the ones taking all the credit. Look at me, see what I've done. They gave credit where credit was due. They didn't seek the limelight. They had their head down. They made sure their people were supported and had the resources. The processes were in place, right? Doing a lot of these quality type things, right? Collaborating, making connections, giving people the courage, right? But there was a level of humility in each of these. Not many. There weren't many leaders who had that level 5 leadership in that study. So I just want to leave you, with that one when we talk about the qualities. So, Kara, I know you have another poll that you were going to share. All right, hey gang, here's the poll. Honest reflection. Which one of these 10 leadership qualities do you feel if you focused on improving it in the next 30 days, it would have the most impact on your organization? Single choice. What one, if you made progress and were really intentional on improving this quality in the next 30 days, you feel that would have the most impact on your organization? And I would say your people, even yourself. It would just have a large impact. Okay, we've got 21% at confidence. Yeah, confidence and conflict are tied. I'm not surprised. Yeah, great. Yeah, and once I talked about it earlier when we talked about confidence. A lot of times it's getting your reps, putting yourself in some of those situations, having the courage to ask the question, being more curious, embracing that conflict. It is going to lead to even more and more confidence. Um, I'll be honest with you. The thought of me doing a presentation like this 15 years ago scared the you know what out of me. It never would have happened. Um, but I've done this enough times. I've been courageous. I've been curious. I've increased my competence, right, increasing my skills and understanding of how to do this better and wanting to. And as a result, it's increased my impact and influence in those that I work with. And my confidence is so much higher today than it was 10 to 15 years ago because I've taken the reps, I put myself in some of those difficult situations, made the hard decisions. So confidence doesn't happen overnight. It does take time, but it is possible. So I want to go on to this next slide and just encourage each of you, and this is in the PDF that was provided to you as well, but I encourage you to have an honest reflection at some point. We don't have to do it now, but at some point this week, next week, go through and rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. Yourself individually, and then I'm also curious, how would you rate your organization in some of these qualities? Are we as an organization confident? Where are we on a scale from 1 to 10? How are we in terms of making connections in the community or with our volunteers or donors, right? And just rate ourselves and also rate the organization. And I love this because I encourage you then to use this as a conversation starter within your team, your staff, your board perhaps, and talk about where you rated yourself and where you rated your organization. Maybe you're having regular weekly one-on-ones with a direct report. This would be a really great conversation to have to see where that individual rated themselves and where they want to improve. Okay, let's move on. Now, typically, this is where the conversation stops, right? We talk about all the qualities, all the things we can do to get better and improve, but we very rarely say, okay, well, what's going to get in the way? What's going to prevent us from being more curious? What's going to prevent us from being courageous and stepping into that conflict when we know it's going to be difficult, right? There's 10 obstacles that I want to cover and have you think about and start thinking about how you might get through and over some of those, right? Chaos. What do we mean by chaos? It's the disruption of rhythms and routines. And I'm here to say that the chaos never goes away. But I mentioned it earlier about choosing your hard and doing hard better, right? There's a visual, it comes from the book, The One Thing. And in the book, The One Thing, it talks about what's the one thing we can do such that by doing it will make everything else easier or unnecessary. Now, the challenge there is finding out, well, what's that first domino? What is that one thing? But typically in organizations, there is so much chaos that you've got the executive director going in that direction, volunteers going in that direction, the program director thinks they should go in that direction, board chair, you're right, and there's chaos and there's no organization, right, to keep us aligned and on the same page. That's where we want to go. There's still going to be chaos, but we want us all to be aligned and on the same page, rowing in the same direction. That's a gift, having that clarity, knowing that, yeah, it's chaotic. Yeah, there's some uncertainty. I get it, right? But we know where we're going, what we need to do, and how we're going to do it, right? And rowing in that direction is a big, big win in navigating and addressing that chaos that may exist within your organization. Confusion. Confusion is the uncertainty about shifting expectations or responsibilities. Let me share this, right? Clarity attracts, confusion repels. By us not addressing some confusion within our organization is actually repelling our people, potential donors, preventing a potential board member from stepping on and wanting to be a board member. So how are we handling and navigating the confusion that may exist within our organization? And typically what happens, in my experience in working with organizations that have a level of confusion, is there's lack of strategy, right? There's lack of that clarity. There's a question that comes to mind or a statement that comes to mind is just because we can doesn't mean we need to do it, right? And a strategy, what I like about strategic plans is it gives us the opportunity to pre-decide how we're going to make decisions. A strategic plan helps us pre-decide how we're going to make decisions. So when the confusion does rear its ugly head and the uncertainty comes knocking at our door, we know how we're going to navigate that with more clarity and more certainty because we have a strategic plan that we already developed and we know how we're going to make that decision. We might not know what the decision is, but we know how we're going to go about making that decision. You know, uh, also when we talk about decisions, this comes to mind. And a lot of times there's the uncertainty and the confusion that's out in the world that weighs on us. And I know that's a real thing. But if I could break it down into three areas when we're dealing with confusion and uncertainty and trying to make decisions, one is control. What can we control? Right? What is in my control in this moment that can impact our next best step? Next is influence. What can I influence? Maybe we aren't the decision makers, but we can influence the decision maker to have an outcome that we know is a better outcome. The last one is things out of our control. This is where the anxiety is, the worry is there, right? And that's where we spend a lot of our energy in things that we simply cannot control. What would happen if we had the awareness and the mindset to focus then and put our energy toward the things we can control and can influence? That helps tremendously in our mindset and our positivity, with our clarity then to navigate during any confusion. All right, let's move on. Coasting. This is a painful one. Coasting is taking the foot off the metaphorical pedal. It was painful to see, but I worked with an organization several years ago. 20-year executive director announced their retirement. In the last 6 months, it was a slow, idle car going down the street. It was painful to see, and you could just kind of feel and see this, the air slowly leaking out of the organization for about 6 months because that leader took their foot off the pedal at times. So coasting, that's an obstacle. What do we do when we notice that might be happening? You know what, before I go on, what's resonating? Chaos, confusion, coasting. Put it in the chat, right? Which one are you having the most challenge with right now? Is it chaos, confusion, or coasting? Okay. Oh, we got a lot. Great. Confusion, chaos. Okay. A lot of a lot of confusion and chaos, a little bit of coasting. Okay, guys, thank you for your honesty and transparency here. Oh, we're completely coasting and need help with that. Tracy, I'd love to have a conversation with you. Yeah, that's painful. Coasting, all right. Guys, thank you. Thank you for your vulnerability here. You know, again, a lot of this is just simply having that awareness and being vulnerable enough to admit it. Right? That is the first step toward overcoming any of these obstacles. All right, I want to keep moving along here. Comfort is the next obstacle, right? Engaging mostly in easy and unimportant activities. Guys, you know, it goes back to earlier when I talked about at times when you say, oh, it's just easier for me to do it. It only takes 5 minutes. And we've deprived somebody from that opportunity, right? If I can talk a little bit about us as leaders, knowing that, yeah, it's comfortable to do some of the easy and unimportant activities. Again, we're depriving somebody, but if I could add to that, it's this topic of delegation. And we don't delegate just to move stuff off our desk and pass that task on to someone else. We as leaders have a responsibility. When we're delegating, is it elevating somebody else? We delegate to elevate. Are we giving that other person an opportunity to increase their competence, increase their skill set, increase their confidence because they have the opportunity to take on a difficult task to them, right? It might be easy and unimportant to you, but to them, it's hard and important because it's important to their own development. So be thinking about when we're delegating, we're also giving an opportunity to someone else to elevate their skills and elevate the organization. And thirdly, elevate yourself because now you have freed up some of your time to what I want to go into is for you to step into your zone of genius. And that concept, zone of genius, zone of excellence, zone of incompetence, and zone of competence comes from the book called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. And a lot of times we as leaders, we tend to be stuck in that zone of excellence, which those are things that we're really, really good at. We can make a great living doing that, but there are others who can do it just as well, right? But that zone of genius is the area that only we are uniquely qualified to do some of the activities and the tasks in that zone. No one else in our organization can. So avoiding that comfort level and stepping into that hard, right? Doing the zone of genius type activities gets you out of that comfort zone, right? Challenging yourself every day to do something a little uncomfortable. Again, it's going to go back. It's going to lead to that confidence. It's giving you that courage to do those hard things better. Complacency, doing the bare minimum by merely checking the boxes. Doing the bare minimum by merely checking the boxes. We're complacent. Next, cautiousness, uneasy and unsettled about the future, resulting in minimal innovation. I talked about this a second ago when I talked about things we can control, influence, and not control. But uneasy and unsettled about the future, right? We're thinking about and we're worried and we're anxious about the future. I think it was Cornell and Penn State. They both did separate research studies about anxiety, and they determined that between 85 and 92% of the things that we worry about never actually happen. Think about that. 85 to 92% of the things that we are cautious about, maybe, or are anxious about and worry about, never actually happen. So, what happens if we can have that awareness of, are we being too cautious? What does it look like to play to win instead of playing not to lose? Right? Let's take that chance, that calculated risk. It's the difference between that scarcity mindset and that abundant mindset. So that's an obstacle maybe for some of us. We might be too cautious. Carelessness. We're distracted and preoccupied, leading to disorganization. Right? We lack focus. Sometimes in carelessness, it's the shiny object syndrome. Right? And again, I talked about this earlier about creating clarity, and it's having a strategic plan. Having that clarity around where we're going, what we're going to do, and how we're going to do it can help combat and help you navigate through the carelessness that might be happening within your organization. So let me stop there for a moment. Let's do a quick check in the chat. Out of comfort, complacency, cautiousness, and carelessness, which one is resonating? Which one is a difficult one right now within your organization, or maybe with you? Coasting, cautiousness. Okay. Cautious, complacency. Okay. Great. Great. Thank you. It seems to be pretty even with those different areas. Yeah. Carelessness as we are running so hard. That's concerning, right? We're running so hard. I heard this analogy recently. A couple of weeks ago, I was at a retreat and we talked about running so hard, and where oftentimes we think, oh, this is a marathon. Well, what if we changed it from a mindset of this is a marathon that's going to take a while to sprints? We're going to do a sprint, right? You see this a lot in the tech world and startup world. We're going to do a 2-week sprint, and then we're going to take a break. We're going to put it out there. We're going to learn some things, catch our breaths, and then we're going to do another 2-week sprint, right? Rest and recreation is critically important to all of us. I don't care what level of leader, but recreation and rest is critically important. Are we taking time for ourselves to just take a break and catch our breaths and stop running so hard, right? Let's do those sprints and take time for ourselves. So thank you for that. All right, let's move on. Conflict. Interesting. We talked about conflict earlier, but it also pops up as an obstacle. It's the tense or strained relationships within the organization. Yeah. But if we have the courage to step into the conflict, then we can embrace conflict as a leadership quality. But sometimes it stops here as an obstacle and we're paralyzed and we don't do anything about it. Relationships get strained. So I'm working with an organization out west, and a couple of years ago started coaching with the CEO, and he was vulnerable and he told me, he said, look, our team lacks trust. There's a lot of conflict. There's a lot of uneasiness. The board, there's a lot of strained relationships with the board. The board isn't as confident in me and my ability as CEO. So we talked about that, right? How do you improve those relationships within the organization? In this particular case, with his board and his team. And you know what? It takes time. But he had the courage to step in, to do the deep work, to ask the curious questions, to collaborate, to make connections, and to increase that confidence. He's done a complete 180. And I look forward to being with his team every quarter. We get together, and the health of that team and that organization is a complete 180 from where it was 2 years ago. Because they did navigate, they navigated the conflict with courage and confidence and curiosity, and they did the work. And the relationships improved dramatically. I'm going to cover these next two together. There's cynicism and complaining. Cynicism is that pessimistic attitude that is internalized, and complaining is the negative attitude expressed to others. So that cynicism, right? We keep it inside. It's that self-talk. It's that attitude, that negative attitude that we have, and that's internalized. But then if we take it to an external expression, now we're complaining, right? Do we like complainers, right? How many people are in your organization that seem to just always complain? Do you like to be around them? No, we don't, right? If I could share a really quick tool when we find ourselves having that negative self-talk, that pessimistic attitude, and it's the 3 I's. One is identify it. Identify this negative talk, this negative attitude. Identify it. Then the second I is investigate. Where's it coming from? Why is this happening? Why do I feel this way? Why am I having these thoughts? What's contributing to that? All open-ended, curious questions. And then third, interrogate. And what do police officers do during an interrogation? What are they trying to do? They're trying to understand what's true. What's bubbling to the surface that is actually true? Separating fact from fiction, right? So we're interrogating it aggressively to find out what is actually true. And I guarantee you about 99.9% of the time, it's not because of you. That negative self-talk, that pessimistic attitude simply is not true. If I could talk a moment about complaining, and again, this comes from Mary Lee Adams and Change Your Questions, Change Your Life. There's a learner mindset and a judger mindset. And that learner mindset, they're always curious, right? They're doing a lot of the things that we're covering here today. They take ownership. They're accountable. They're responsible. They're aware of the choices that are in front of them. They're looking at difficulties and hardship perhaps, or things that are out of their control as opportunities. They're asking themselves, what does this make possible? Curious, open-ended question, right? They have a learner mindset, and they're asking themselves those curious, open-ended questions, right, for innovation and growth. On the other side, there's the judger mindset. They seem to be blaming and making excuses and in denial. They're complaining all the time, right? What happens? It leads to frustration. That negative attitude permeates throughout the organization, right? And so navigating that and slowly over time, flipping that equation or that dynamic into more of a learner mindset and culture within your organization, practicing some of these obstacles, or practicing some of the qualities, but then having some awareness on how to navigate through some of these obstacles is important. So, Kara, Let's go ahead and put another poll up there. Let's answer this last poll. Which one of these 10 obstacles do you feel, if you focused on proactively addressing it in the next 30 days, would have the most impact on your organization? I'm curious which ones bubble up to the surface. Pretty even across the board. Interesting. Complacency and cautiousness seem to be rising to the top, but not by much. All right. Interesting. Good. Thank you, everyone. So, same as the last time. Take some time to reflect. How are you doing on a scale from 1 to 10 in dealing with that obstacle? How are you doing versus how's the organization doing in terms of addressing that? But hey, I encourage you guys, this is a free leadership alignment check, that QR code that you see on your screen. Grab that. It's free. It's going to ask you a bunch of questions on clarity. It's going to ask you some questions about courage, about confidence, your readiness for growth. So take that, and then you'll get a full report on some areas, opportunities for you to focus in and lean on. There's also an opportunity to schedule a 30-minute call with me, no charge, right? If you just want to go through and talk about some of your results and things that you can be doing to be an extraordinary leader, happy to have that conversation. But there's the QR code. Let's go ahead and say thank you, each and every one of you. I really appreciate what you guys are doing, the work that you're doing, and why you do that. You are truly making the world a better place. So I thank you guys. And to Kara and Bruce and Brady Ware, just thanks for the opportunity to have this for all the nonprofit leaders out there. All right, have a great day, everyone. Keep doing your meaningful work in a meaningful way.